The Public Service Pay and Pensions Bill, Minister, obviously is an implementation of the Public Services Stability Agreement. Now, in doing so, some public sector workers who voted to accept the deal will get some pay restoration, which they very badly need and obviously deserve. However, there is something extremely rotten in this bill, a very Thatcherite tactic of divide and conquer, because other workers will suffer from this bill. Those who rejected the PSSA because of real and specific impact on their lives. The 3 teachers' unions have all voted no. And the first thing that this brings up is that nobody should have the right to vote on the work conditions of other people. That's the first thing. It's just a democratic right that if you're not impacted in the same way, you shouldn't have the right to force other people to accept it. Now, this bill is negative overall. It compounds and continues the 2-tier pay inequality for all young public servants. Again, some more than others, but all. And how disgraceful, Minister, that that's been maintained. In the introduction, the Minister said there's also a legal entitlement to this restoration, since the FEMPI Acts, which significantly reduced pay and pension entitlements, were predicated on a financial emergency of unprecedented severity, from which we've now thankfully emerged. Why then is there any justification for maintaining those austerity measures that were placed on public sector workers? There's none whatsoever. Now, no change can occur to the real wound that's been inflicted on young workers of unequal pay for the whole duration of this agreement, which is 3 years. And that's no justification for maintaining that. Never waste a good crisis is obviously being implemented. And the so-called pension levy, which was meant to be temporary, it was meant to be a temporary measure for the bailout, is not removed. It remains, and there's no prospect that it will ever go. And therefore, it's reducing the pay of most public servants. But what's particularly nefarious about this bill is that punishment is being meted out to all those who didn't accept the deal, the 3 teachers' unions in particular. I love the language, Minister, in the briefing document. This is classic yes, Minister kind of stuff. There's question 2. How are public servants who do not sign up to be treated? Answer. To incentivise adherence to the collective approach, the bill provides for less favourable terms for public servants who are not covered. Did you ever in all your life to incentivise adherence to the collective approach? An incentive is meant to be something that's an actual, attractive thing. So those who don't agree will get slower pay restoration, B, the suspension of increments up to 2021, and C, a lower entry threshold for ASC. In other words, they'll pay more of this so-called pension levy that was introduced as a temporary measure. I remember because I was teaching at the time. That's absolutely outrageous stuff. And what I would say is, teachers are going to be punished now. They're going to have their increments frozen and they're going to continue with a higher pension levy. This is an absolute attack on the right to be in a union, on the right to, on democratic rights, and on the right of people to decide their own fate. And it therefore is something that other people in other unions should take note of. The whole common basic scale has been completely upended, and that division is now going to be maintained, that people will be on different rates, will have different punishments meted out to them. Now, did you ever sit and wonder why is it teachers that seem to continually vote against this? And maybe people out there don't understand. And this time, by the way, Minister, it's all 3 teachers' unions. Do you remember? You were happy to try to isolate the ASTI in the previous agreement, but now all 3 teachers' unions are at one on this. Because, and the reason is, teachers have been more impacted by pay inequity. Because young teachers who were appointed after 2011 have already lost over 26,000 in earnings that they would have had if they were on the same scale as their counterparts before 2011. But they've also as well lost the other pay cuts that their senior colleagues lost as well. And this is the so-called locked-out generation. You know, young so-called professionals, young workers who can't afford to pay rent, who can't afford to buy a house or get a mortgage, obviously can't afford to do many other things that they would have been able to do in the past. It's an infliction of worse conditions on young people, the type of revolt that led to Jeremy Corbyn's massive increase in vote in Britain, and something that you should take note of yourselves. I was talking to a young teacher out on the protest outside before this debate, and he was making the point that obviously teachers are always concerned about, if they take any industrial action, what will happen to the children. And, you know, as we said, well, what about your kids that you might like to have at some stage in the future? Do they not count as well? And I believe that parents, I believe the public, understand this. They do understand why teachers and others are not willing to accept unequal pay. And what I would say to teachers is this: stick to your guns, organise, put on massive pressure. This government is hanging on by a thread, as we saw over the weekend. It's on its last legs. The arrangement between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael is mortally wounded. They're both at one on this issue of no recovery for workers. They're absolutely unanimous about that, no disagreement whatsoever. And massive pressure can be put on Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour, who aren't even here tonight, to reverse this. And by the way, you wonder why there's a massive shortage of teachers, because their choice is fight or emigrate. Why would any young person stay who's went to huge trouble to get qualifications, not just degrees and HDips, but usually masters and all sorts of other qualifications now that teachers routinely get now? Why should they stay and put up with this when they get amply well paid in other countries? But what are we going to do about the brain drain? Because we have already heard reports about unqualified teachers teaching in schools, while qualified teachers have had to emigrate because they can't live in this country. I mean, rents in my constituency are routinely now €1,600 to €2,000. How could any young teacher afford to pay that, or any other young worker for that matter? And I just wanted to pick up lastly on something that the Minister said in his introduction. He said that there have been considerable sacrifices for a decade of austerity, a lost decade for a lot of people, and it had reaped benefits for the economy. And this is the reward that workers get. But he also said our teachers, nurses, Gardaí and other public servants and their retired counterparts are deserving of the pay and pension restoration set out in this bill, but teachers aren't going to be getting any restoration out of this bill, so it was a bit disingenuous of the Minister. And he doesn't even make reference to the fact that people who don't accept the tyranny, the diktat that's handed down, won't get anything and will be punished. I mean, I think people should take a lesson from this. In the past, if you didn't agree with a pay deal, you just didn't get the pay deal. Now what happens is you don't just not get the pay deal, you also get other things taken off you for daring not to agree. And this is the new neoliberal normal in this country. And unless we actually build a political alternative and also a trade union alternative, it's not a good reflection, I can tell you, on the trade union leadership to accept this kind of erosion into long-standing pay and conditions, and to inflict that on a new generation. But I'd also make another point, that previously, the easy targets were young workers, but clearly what's happening now is, as well, the government and the establishment are deciding to target older workers and to go after their pensions. And I think that this is really sinister and should be noted by everybody, and I hope that the three teachers' unions will come together and will discuss what united action that they can take about this. And they should hold their nerve, because, as I said, a general election is definitely on the cards sometime soon, and they should make political capital out of this.